and
You shouldn't have to enter a password.
okay.
What I'm gonna be I haven't brought any of this up yet, but I'm gonna be shifting. We've been building a mobile app for a little while. In the next few weeks, I'm gonna shift everything over to that mobile app. So that may change kind of what goes on with this stuff, but
You know, he's shutting down ocengine.com.
in its current format.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Why is that crazy?
It's crazy.
We've got 3 people on this thing, and it's like the same 3 people that are on every week. Like, why? OC Engine isn't changing the world right now. Like, why is that crazy at all?
No, it's just like OC Engine has been with us for so long. I mean, I remember when it first went up. I was like exposing the original bugs in the site and everything.
Like
and
3 months ago, dude.
No, it wasn't 3 months ago. It was definitely in 2019 sometime the original OC Engine site went up. When was that?
That's true.
All right. Well, it's gonna flip format. Doesn't matter. But I'm gonna try to turn it more into like broadcast notifications. So I'm gonna try to tie in like some of the features from like YouTube where people can get notifications for upcoming events, and you can like subscribe, like when an event goes live and stuff like that. I'm gonna try to turn the platform more into like basically like strip out the video component from YouTube and like make it look more like that, and allow you to basically plug in any video platform you want for the viewing side of things. So if you want to use Zoom, cool. If you want to, like Kevin might want to use, not you, Kevin, but Finkbeiner might want to use YouTube, since he's more of just pure streaming. So kind of decouple like the video component from the social and notification component. That's what I'm thinking.
Now, Matt, one thing I really appreciate about my streaming platforms is the number of passwords I have to type in before getting to the stream. How many are we planning to have? I'm sorry.
God damn.
Sorry.
I'll tell you what, you're on the WhatsApp list while this thing has been being developed, so you could have influenced that. So to be totally honest, when it comes to anybody being able to bitch about how the app operates, you are culprit number 1. You can't say anything.
I know. I'm sorry. You've exposed my hypocrisy.
Sorry, dude.
No, you're good.
This is great. I just want to hear like an hour long of this.
Like Kevin just like turning the screws. Just fuck you, man. Shoot, I'm live on. We're gonna get flagged for parental advisory.
Matt and I should start a podcast. I think that's what should happen. Wait, you had a podcast that was abandoned. What happened? Is that ever going to come back?
I don't think there's clearly a trend in my behavior. It's you start something and then you're like,
Yeah, you had like a cartoon and everything. I was like, oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, you did have a cartoon. Did you make that?
No, dude. I just looked up sloth with coffee cup. I gotta show you this. I know this is totally off topic. So Matt, whenever you wanna go, feel free. While we're doing this, I'm gonna pull up a video I made for it was a short-lived experiment. It was called Rover, and basically I made a cartoon. Like I actually like paid for a cartoon to be made with the characters from Scooby-Doo. It's pretty fantastic. I'm gonna pull it up while you're doing your thing, and then I'll show you guys. It is nothing related to any of this.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's just stupid crap that I've made to try to market a company that 3 weeks after putting way too much time into it, I killed. That's it. Anyway.
All right. So did you want me to start, or did you want me to read it?
This is your show, dude. I'm sorry. I should shut up.
Okay. Um, I guess you'll show that at whenever, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll text you guys. We doesn't need to be part of this show. I apologize. I'm gonna shut up. I don't
Okay.
get a whole lot of social contact.
Yeah, being indoors a lot. I definitely hear you.
Although I think they're lifting the restrictions soon, right? At
Yeah,
least,
that's what we were saying. Like next week, I heard.
yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I guess I'll get started with my topic for today. It was very much inspired by the kind of talk that we had afterwards last week. And I remember when Matt kind of jumped back in, he's like, "You guys are still talking?" I'm like, "Yeah, we are." And then it was kind of about like, okay, what are like the practical kind of things that we can do, you know, with trying to actually get people more educated about um, how society is evolving, what culture is doing, and how to, actually have a positive impact. And so I kind of looked at a couple of people that were doing kind of similar stuff. The Eric Weinstein with his podcast Portal. Obviously, those are the YouTubers that I follow, actualize.org, Rebel Wisdom, there's various other ones. And they're all kind of reaching around the same kind of theme, which is like making sense of the world more. So I guess I'm kind of falling into that realm a little bit. But what really kind of caught my eye was one topic that I think is really being spearheaded by Daniel Schmachtenberger. And it's the contrast between what he calls game A, which is our common day, pretty much, which is very rivalrous. And we're all trying to get a piece of the pie of, the capitalistic kind of focus and individual right kind of focus of trying to get as much as I can for myself. And, we externalize a lot of costs to the environment in various different pieces of that. We can very much see, in our common day being marketed of a whole bunch of garbage products and stuff like that so that people can get rich. That's a lot to do with, game A. And then the game B dynamic is going to be focused on how can we all have more decentralized units, more decentralized pieces of economic prosperity that is, subject to us all. Now, how do we decentralize like a company, let's say like Uber, so that everybody can actually call upon these people or call upon, this decentralized kind of organization that can provide a service to humanity so that all of humanity can benefit from it. So that, that person that is, a fantastic pianist, for example, can actually go to get piano lessons and that it's funded by, some government organization or whatnot. So that, everybody can actually have better pianists in their life, just as an example. And I got to thinking, like, how exactly would we actually put that into place? What are kind of like the pieces to do that? And there are some kind of loose, proof of concepts out there in certain types of countries, more so like, Northern Europe and stuff like that. But I'm thinking that this is, mostly going to be a problem of just education and actually getting people to know that there are different ways to organize business. You can see that with, corporate rebels, reinventing organizations, brave new work, all those kinds of things on new structures in business. There's new ways to do politics, obviously. I mean, I think we talked about that a little bit much here. There's different ways to do anything else with like your personal development. It's not just about acquiring material wealth. It's, more so about spiritual growth, which I think is a very taboo subject for our common culture to be even talking about. And I think that that could be very, very much tackled, especially when it comes to like, psychedelics and stuff like that. They're becoming a lot more in favor now, especially since, Denver legalized mushrooms, which I have no idea how they got that across, but they did. And so there's a lot of educational things on these types of topics that I think would be the biggest key point. And I think that if we had other systems that kind of fueled that educational process, then it would be, I think that would have a really big impact. So one of the things, and this was an idea that was kind of given to me by Leo from actualize.org, and he was talking about his political proposals for like a higher consciousness society or whatnot, was to have a completely transparent marketplace where everything that you'd really want to know about a product is just kind of there. So much like, I'll give this analogy of much like how when you buy food, you know what the ingredients are within that. And what I think that would be really cool is if there was some sort of marketplace online, some type of thing that would kind of like push this idea forward, that every product that is out there on this website, on this marketplace, has the profit margin on the actual sale of the product. And maybe we can put in some other things like, you know, what is the environmental cost of it? What is this thing? What is that thing? Just to have a good whole understanding of what you're actually spending your money on, rather than it just being like some toilet paper that you buy or whatnot. So I think that if you were to have that kind of spearheaded kind of project, then you can take that thing, maybe it's like a nonprofit organization, something like that, you start, and that can be like a starting point for other people to see, like, okay, they've kind of, you know, helped out with this non-rivalrous kind of dynamic, so we can actually, you know, do business with each other, and everybody sees what the profit margins are. So you actually have to provide value, and when people kind of question things, you can kind of see, like, you know, where is everything going. And certainly the businesses within themselves can have a certain type of stamp of approval saying, okay, you're transparent with how everybody is being paid in the organization. Everybody can see how everybody's being paid, and the structure of it is in a way so that, you know, everybody's not withholding information, so that they can look better to their boss, and so that they can, you know, actually have a free and clear and clean information ecology within their company, and then they can share that with other companies and stuff like that. There's a lot of different pieces that can go into that place. But I think if you create that kind of environment, then that can be the home and the center for a solution to a lot of these different, very complex problems. And you can kind of export that solution to other places that are having problems. And within itself, the solution, you know, is the structure itself, and therefore it can't really be, you know, manipulated to a certain extent, so that it can, you know, serve some type of nefarious needs. It's like it only works when everything kind of fits together and it's completely transparent. Because as soon as it's not transparent and it's opaque and there's, you know, some power dynamics, like huge power dynamics going on, then it's just not going to function the same. So that's my idea. That's something that I think is pretty damn interesting. I think that, you know, having that in practice and actually having it, you know, go through and creating something like that. I know that, you know, Matt, you're definitely not excited about things that don't go anywhere. So I think that if this was something that was like really pushed forward, and we got a lot of people on the site that were selling products and they were completely transparent, I think that it would get a lot of attention. I mean, especially if we try to actually market it. And I don't think that there's be any kind of conflict of actually kind of marketing this thing, and, you know, selling products and being clear, because then it's just a new way of doing business. Um, so I think it opens up a lot of avenues for growth. So that's my talk for today. I'll open it up. I know there's probably some comments somewhere about this.
Kevin and I both unmuted. Go ahead, man.
Go ahead to me.
Yeah.
Oh, I think the basic question I have is why? Why do you think that? Why do you think consumers need this, desire this sort of transparency? Like, not specifically why you want the transparency,
Mm-hmm.
but like why consumers in general would want this type of transparency.
I think first, uh, just so just people would have a curiosity. It's like, oh, what is the profit margin on olive oil? Like, what is the regular thing? And then once that idea is in their head, I mean, it's more so about like people just being aware of what's going on. Um, and so I think that first off, it'd be kind of curiosity. But I think long term, and this may be very long term, this may be like a shorter long term, I don't know, 5 years, 20 years, I don't know. Uh, if we have, the I don't know what you call it, the brand, the mental real estate of like being that company, being that organization, and the culture kind of shifts towards wanting to be more transparent, which you're seeing it's going to want to be that way. Then I think that I don't know. I feel like it's kind of like a done deal. It's just it's going to people are going to want that. I mean, that's just my perspective and like everything that I've kind of studied with evolutionary psychology. But to answer your question, I guess very kind of bluntly, it's like why would people want it now? There are people I think that want to know if they're getting screwed over. I think that there are people that want to know if they are, you know, being sold something that has a huge profit margin, and it's like, okay, why are you selling me this little booklet with like an 80% profit margin, and the retailer gets this much, and then the wholesaler gets this much, and then the company that actually sells it gets this much. I'm like, why don't I just buy it from them? Like there's so many different pieces that I think people just don't like put together with the entire structure of how business works. And I think that it's done on purpose for a large extent. Not like it's not like everybody's like completely aware of like why they're being so opaque and why they don't really tell people everything. But I think that if you get a very clean, like clear information ecology out there, I think it benefits everybody really. And I think that'll take a little bit of time for people to kind of see. Hopefully that answers that. But
I
I,
suppose
I
so.
I love the example of olive oil, mainly because it's food and beverage, and like I can actually speak to that. Um, I'm wondering how you. I think it's interesting that you broke it down into the retailer gets this, the so and so gets like it's clearly a supply chain issue, right? Somebody makes it and it needs to get to the consumer, and there's various channels that you can go through to make that happen. Some
Mhm.
more direct than others. So obviously, like that rating depends on that channel in some respect. Um, so like supply chain efficiency depend like different channels have different efficiencies, hence different profit margins. Where I think it's a really I think it's a really interesting like I think it's a really interesting like uh, uh, like thought concept. In practice, I'm really interested. I think there would need to be a real marketing wrapper around it and something more that would like I don't think companies are going to want to list like their exact margin, but if you could wrap like this marketing wrapper around it where there's almost like a qualifying agency that has like graphics that show like you know what I mean? Like I don't know, something that's a little more pictorial that gets to the point, but does that, but gives that level of, uh, you know, that puts a little blinders up so that people aren't being totally transparent. I think like that would facilitate a deal more easily. One
uh, yeah, what would you mean by putting blinders up?
like I don't think so. When it comes to getting a product on shelves, so generally, um, so when I make a product, I take a profit margin, right? And in my margin, I've got marketing costs, I've got a bunch of costs from a company. From the time I sell it to basically the time a consumer buys it, you're about at 100% markup. So essentially the price doubles from the company that makes it to the consumer buying it, generally through a retail channel. Now, what's crazy is that like most grocery store items, they're an 8% or less profit margin at the grocer. So the question is like, holy crap, it's getting marked up 100%, and then the guy that's selling it is only making 8%. Yup. Where you get into is like things like, okay, there's like a ton of margin going to sales, and some people would be like, to me, to be honest, like earlier in my career from the engineering mindset, I'm like, dude, why are they like what these guys aren't doing anything. The reality is there's a ton of risk, and there's also other agents, other products that are embedded that are putting their dollars against your dollars, and so you basically have to waste dollars to compete against them. So like there's this concept that the system is fully efficient, when in reality there's a ton of money going towards baked in inefficiencies that are there, like you said before. Like it's purposeful. It is purposeful, because you've got these people that have spent 50 years to get their shelf life, or their shelf space, and you better absolutely, they don't want another product to come in and replace them, so they're going to put up the walls. I mean, you even get into where like grocery stores, the margins are so thin, and they have a lot, in some places in the country they have a ton of power, they've got a lot of brand um, cash, that they charge slotting fees, i.e., as a brand, I pay you, Mr. Retailer, 100 grand to get on your shelf before I even ever sell a product. So I mean, and I don't think, if I was a brand owner, I don't think I would want you putting on my label that I paid 100 grand to get on the shelf to even have an opportunity to sell to the customer. Actually, as a brand, I might want you to put that on there. But then the retailer is going to be like, no, we don't want our consumers to see that. Like the interests are not aligned.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I love it, because I would love that transparency, because frankly, I think what it does, I'm not sure how it would shift the power, actually. I don't really know, but I think transparency is a good thing. I'm confident. I'm confident. I hope people are I hope there are people that are not confident. I hope you're not confident that it in what I'm saying, but like I feel confident that like the vested interests of these parties they're immediately going to be off put by it, unless there's something real slick that makes them feel like oh man, like I'm on board with this, because it is like opposed to what their vested interest is, or what their like natural tendency would be. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think it's kind of the fight between how can we be not transparent and make thick profit margins, and how to be transparent and with, the like being what's the right term? Like being in a better relationship with like your common man, like how can
Yeah.
we be a part of a better culture that's not going to just sell a bunch of crap, you know? So I think it's more of a cultural shift than a marketing play, because we're basically trying to get rid of a piece of marketing in a sense. Um,
Fair.
yeah, so I think that it's going to be more so consumer driven, and I think that there's going to be a lot of companies like, let's say, like if this actually happens, which I feel like something like this will probably happen at some point. I mean, you see, uh, what's it, B Corps, and they have their certification, and there's some other ones out there, but that's the biggest one, and they have to be very transparent about a lot of different things. And one of them is, their environmental impact, and they have to have an annual report every single year that they have to file. But then they get that stamp of approval, and when I go, get freaking, let's say, coconut milk, whatever, and I see the B Corp sign, I'm like, okay, I know that there's a certain rigor and scrutiny that they went down to actually get that thing. I mean, they're going to probably be a little more trustworthy than this other brand. Um, not to say that I trust it completely, because I looked at some of the companies that they sanctioned, and I'm like, okay, whatever. But to have that and to be a part of that group, for lack of a better term, I think will grow in um, in power uh, for years to come, and I think it'll probably take a long time.
Yeah, I think you might have. I mean, I think you said it. Like, I think the direct to consumer market, I think, is a lot more reasonable than the retail channel. Um,
Mhm.
so like this is much more of an internet concept in my mind than it is
Mhm.
like traditional retail until there's that consumer demand for it, right? But you really gotta. I think you need to have a pretty simple supply chain for this type of thing to work today.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, maybe not, but like today, you basically need that direct consumer relationship of, hey, we actually know what our profit margins are, because a lot of these sales channels, they got no idea. Like they really don't. It works.
Yeah. It functions. Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, I always kind of think, I guess, like this idea, I think a cool fantasy to kind of throw out there is like, what if, Jeff Bezos like sold his company and then, Amazon was bought up by some, very rich, like super green tree hugging guy. And then he's like, everybody has to showcase their profit margins. I mean, just imagine like the just the complete shift in our entire economy if that were to happen. Um, and if there was some like, let's say government mandate in all of, let's say, Orange County, that every product that's put on the shelf needs to show their profit margin. Just to think like the huge shockwave that would have in our entire system of everything. I mean, everything I feel like would be affected by it. And I don't think that it would be a negative thing overall. I mean, I think that there will be some things that are sold and that won't really be marketable very much anymore just because of that fact. But I think that overall it'd be a positive thing. And I would really like to get anybody's opinion that it would actually be a net negative.
Oh,
Yeah. I guess there's not too much to talk about that, but
I got one other question based on something you brought up.
yeah,
You brought up like you brought up like Uber and like people getting the value out of Uber.
yeah,
I'm assuming you like there's some sort of like collective ownership type thing you're talking about there. Is that
yeah, yeah,
like fair? I'm probably dumbing it down too far, but
yeah.
I'm wondering, you know, there's when it comes to one person, there's and like thinking about like supply demand, there's a much greater supply of goods and services than any one person can take advantage of. Is that a fair statement?
Um, I get. I mean, that's kind of like a really, I don't know,
I
that's a
mean,
really rough statement, but yeah.
like like
I
I
definitely
can't
agree.
test every single email service on the planet. I could probably test a couple, but
Yeah,
like there's way more that I could ever like actually test.
I might be able to
Before
write a
yeah, I
program
see what
to
you
test
mean.
them
Okay, all
all.
right. But if you can write a program, there's going to be a bunch of people that can write a program that tests these things, and now I'm going to have to pick which one that I actually go with. So my question is, so at some point, so if there was like this collective ownership type model, at some point, like I'm going to have to pick and choose, okay, well, like what am I actually going to use today?
Hmm.
And I'm wondering if in this kind of like collective ownership model, if you think should people get benefit for being the first people, i.e., the initial risk takers, for saying, I think that one's the one that I'm going to try and go with? or do you think the first person and the last person should be treated the same?
I guess I'm not completely understanding your question. So the people who like there's a huge marketplace of different types of Ubers, let's say for this example. And then the one that comes out on top, the people who own that, should they get an extra benefit from that
Yeah,
being
so like
decentralized?
so there's a ton of them, but
Yeah.
we're just gonna say Uber and like there's a billion of them, and there's Uber and Lyft, and I decide that, hey, I'm gonna go with Uber, and so I start I you know I'm gonna go with Uber, and I maybe I can choose multiple, but I'm just gonna say, you know, for this I'm gonna say the amount of effort that I can put towards figuring out and utilizing ride sharing, I can only choose one. Let's just say, obviously
Yeah.
that's not reality, but and
Yeah.
Kevin's gonna choose Lyft.
Hmm.
Um, one of the, so maybe they move up the same, maybe like as a business, maybe they grow at the same rate. Maybe one grows, faster than the other. Maybe like the value of these companies may differentiate over time, or they may differ over time. The growth rates may change.
Yeah.
And let's say Lyft ends up winning out. And so at some point, I'm going to be like, at Uber, like they haven't done everything. I'm going to pop over to Lyft, and I do so, uh, 2 years after Kevin's kind of already been in the Lyft train. My question is like, when it comes to the amount of like like I don't know if vested equity is the right term, but the amount of like benefit that we get from these things, the amount of ownership in society, are we treated the same, or because Kevin kind of guessed right earlier than me, does he get a greater benefit, or are these things more like owned by the social good, i.e., you know like everybody, and whether or not I use it or not, it doesn't really matter, I kind of just get the benefit.
Gotcha. I guess the way that I would view it is that a company becomes so big, let's say like, Amazon becomes so freaking large that it just becomes like a public service at a certain point. So I feel like at a certain point, like, once you gain a certain market share, it's like, okay, you are now going to have way more government restriction. I think that, I think a lot of this would probably be more political. Um, and, at a certain point, I mean, if it becomes so large, I mean, I say like, internet companies and all that kind of stuff, they have, huge monopolies for lack of a better term. I think that should really just be like a public service at that point. So I mean, the exit for the company, let's say, you just sell off the company at, whatever the market valuation is. And so then whoever invested in it can get that cash that they wanted. And then the service itself will continue as a public
So
good.
so you're more like saying when a company goes public, like they're actually like they're actually going public,
Uh,
like
yeah,
in a way, like maybe
yeah. Like
maybe,
when, yeah. So you're like, when you have your IPO, it's like
yeah,
your stock valuation goes up, and then at a certain point, like you're going like, yeah, like you're a public service at that point, not
yeah,
a
I
company
understand.
in a sense, and in the traditional sense now.
I don't think a lot of people are gonna like that idea.
Yeah,
It's an interesting, I wonder what that would do. Whether people would whether um like people starting companies, you know, would
I
that
mean,
encourage people to start companies or not? Like I don't know. I have no idea.
I mean, you know, I guess that there's a few things. I mean, one, I think that at a certain point, eventually, I think everybody will catch on to understanding that this whole game A, as you describe it, is going to self-destruct. Like there's a lot of different, highly intelligent people and other types of, uh, you know, organizations and things going on that will evaluate that and say, okay, that's definitely true. Um, and so if we were to solve this kind of problem, I think that that's just one piece of it. So I think there's basically that. Another thing is that people really need to understand and be convinced that if you do have a lot of, public service things like that, where, people aren't really paying like a huge profit margin to a company like Uber, and it just, gets decentralized and it's just like a service to everybody, and it's, affordable or free at that point, that does so much more good, and, you know, just it improves our quality of life overall for, the entirety of our state, much more than, you know protecting our capitalistic ideals to the nth degree. I think that people will eventually kind of understand, like, if you could just imagine, like, if some company was really good at, I don't know, helping out with really rich people with firefighting, let's say, and they were able to fly in drones and drop some, really effective chemical on some building that just stops all fires like instantly, and that's privatized. And then eventually it becomes such a big thing that they have economies of scale, and then they can actually provide that product as a service to, middle income people, like higher income people or whatever. But the people who are poor don't get that kind of service, and there's people who are dying when the government can just kind of come in and say, hey, why don't we reorganize this structure to benefit all of humanity, so that people don't have to die, and then there's not going to be any riots about this or anything like that. I mean, at a certain point, I feel like that kind of conversation will be, it will carry more weight.
So
Yeah.
so this doesn't feel like, I don't know if this is socialism or communism, or I don't know what it, maybe it's none of
Well,
them. It
well,
certain and it certainly feels,
yeah.
it feels like anti-capitalism to me, because I don't know how a public market, like an investment market, I don't know how it would function if that, like that. So I don't know if it's any of those things, but it feels anti-capitalistic to me. Is that
I
wrong?
mean, I don't think that it's anti-capitalistic. I think that there's just there, like, as it stands right now, I think a lot of other countries kind of view Americans as like just capitalism at no freaking limit, like it's just like we're just all the way. And I think that is kind of odd. Like, I think it's really kind of strange. And I bring up the firefighting thing and the drum thing more specifically because we are socialists about firefighting. And we're socialists about police, and we're socialists about, Medicare or whatever. I mean, we're very socialist about all these different things with our infrastructure of our society. And they're very, very important to the functioning of our society. And they're also very, very important to the functioning of our capitalistic structure.
I read,
So,
I was listening to a podcast where someone was
yeah,
talking about firefighting, and it was like in the 20s or something like that, and
yeah,
like they'd pull up to a burning building and be like, "You owe us money, and
yeah,
we'll put out the fire."
yeah,
It's like, yeah, I guess that's
yeah.
how it could work.
Yeah,
Good.
that's how it could work. And I think that, there's a part of our, of the American, well, even deeper down to that is a part of our humanity that just says, okay, yeah, I don't think that people should burn, and have their entire state just, burn up in ashes because they forgot to pay their taxes or something. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there's a side of us that's like, okay, yeah, we should probably regulate these banks a little bit more and stop charging us all these ridiculous fees for things that we don't even know about, because it's just not a human thing to do, you know. Um, so yeah, I think that conversation is kind of brewing, and it'll pour out at some point, but I don't know. I think it's already kind of happening, but it's just not loud enough. But the whole, to go even further, I guess the whole like anti-capitalist thing, I don't think that it's, I don't know, because I mean, like I said, you have to have, let's say, roads in order for trucking to happen, which is a very privatized thing. If there wasn't like a social kind of order on things, on developing roads and taxes paying for roads and stuff like that, I mean, I just don't see how the whole trucking thing could happen. And and to say like, oh, well, the trucking companies will just pay for developing the roads. They'll, pay their tolls or something. Everything will be a toll road or something. It's like, it just like at a certain point you have to like look back and say, okay, now this just like it just needs to be for everybody. Like, and there's a certain point where I think that practically makes sense.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Like, I don't know how the road system was, not even like the freeway system, but like the initial roads. I don't know how, were those private? Did the car companies do it for free because they wanted to sell more cars? Like, I wonder. I don't know anything about that. It would be really interesting.
I don't know. I mean, and I guess on top of that, there is corruption and lobbying for more roads instead of railways and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to get into that debate, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of absurd to think that we're either capitalists or we're socialists, and to look at the common like politics and just like the way that we live our lives as Americans and like what we consume as entertainment and everything like that, it's so much more towards the individualistic side rather than the collective side. And so I think that, like I've said before many times, like I think that we're going to swing back more collective in the years coming forward. But I think that there's going to be a lot of, you know, hardcore old school Americans that are going to do all their damnedest to stop that from happening. Because I think that they live in a very different reality than most people do in like major cities and metropolitan areas.
Hey, sorry, real quick. I have
Mhm.
to head out right now, actually. So thank you guys for the conversation. I'm sorry. I wish I could make more comments, but I gotta
Yeah,
go right now. Sorry.
that's okay,
Hi,
man.
Kevin.
See you
Yeah, man.
guys. Bye.
Mm.
Yeah.
I like the idea. I think it'd be interesting to see what the reaction like. I wonder where you would start.
I don't know. I mean, I think that it would be pretty easy to just create, I mean, even like really low grade, like a Shopify something rather, and then you just say, hey, every company that posts on here, it's going to be freaking all of your profit margins are going to be on there, and it's only going to be companies that ship directly to customers, something like that. And then the whole marketing pitch would be like, hey, we're completely transparent. Come by from our site, and just see what the feedback would be, I guess. Of course, I don't know. I don't know how exactly it would play out, but I'm figuring that there will be some people out there that would be like, okay, yeah, definitely, I'm on board.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I mean, especially with like, the rise of like influencers and stuff like that. Like, a lot of people would like to know, like, hey, what is this
Hmm.
brand actually, paying for?
Yeah, and I think that
Um,
uh, I think there's kind of some kind of like, I mean, I feel I can't put like numbers to it or anything like that. But I just get the intuitive feeling that it's already in people's consciousness that they want that. That they can't verbalize it, they can't like explicate it or anything like that. I mean, just seeing some of the pitches at like 1 million cups, and they're like, oh, I want to do this, blah blah, and I see like a lot of the influences and seeing how what's it it was Stephen King's company, Transparency. It's like, there's a lot of that and like all the cultural kind of things with the Real Co. And like obviously there's a lot of food companies out there that want to be super transparent and all that kind of stuff. And uh,
like
just being
Goop.
a what?
Nothing.
Oh,
I said like Goop.
like
That
you.
was a joke.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that it's in everybody's kind of consciousness right now. At least I think more so California and a lot of leading edge, places that people would want that. So I don't know. I think it would be a pretty cool project just to do, just to
Yeah.
see. I mean, if it was like if you were bored and you didn't have anything else to do, and you're like, fuck this OC engine thing, I'm gonna do something else. Uh, you know,
I
I
think it.
would love to see that. I would actually help with that if that's what you wanted to do. But I don't know.
I think it would be interesting to see like if you can get companies like brands to be excited about it, because I think the consumer would come if there were cool products on it and they matched kind of, you know what I mean? Like I don't think that would be the hard personally, I don't think that would be a hard part. But like companies are fickle. Like I
Yeah,
think it would be really interesting to see if they would gravitate towards that type of thing. Or
yeah,
like certain type of companies would. Like what
hmm
type of companies? Hmm.
yeah. It'd be interesting to see like what startups kind of jump on board.
Yeah. All
That'd be pretty cool.
right.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. So I guess that's it for today. Yeah,
All right, man.
that was basically it.
Sweet. Well,
Sweet.
have a good evening.
Yep, you too, man.
All right. Take care.